Fantasy Rap
with Austin and Ozzy.
Oh, I just love those boys.
Hey everyone, this is Fantasy Rap, and I'm your host Ozzy.
And I'm your co-host Austin.
You can find us on fantasyrap.com. That is fantasywrap.com. Hey everybody, welcome to the follow-up to week 17 and our last podcast of the 2024 fantasy season. Mm-hmm. I mean, we'll come online again after the, like I said last week, after the Super Bowl, and we'll do some other stuff. But as far as this fantasy season, we're wrapping it up.
Yep.
Let's start with how did we do? You weren't in any playoffs?
Just the consolation.
Okay.
One in the Yahoo League where I got out to a 100-point lead after Saturday.
Okay.
And then Sunday, Wyatt, the guy who I was playing, he came back and I ended up winning by 3 points.
Wow.
Because the Lions kicker missed the 2 PATs. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So you get negatives on those?
No, but it just didn't.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. He could have used those.
Well, didn't he miss? Did he miss a couple field goals too?
I think he might have. So
yeah.
I mean, he could have easily won, but it was funny. We were playing Call of Duty during that game on Sunday, and he was over there just he's words I can't use on the podcast. Monday, yes.
Monday night.
Sorry, yeah. Cussing up a storm because he missed, the couple field goals or the PATs, and I'm sitting there laughing. He's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I might not win 7th place in the league. That it doesn't matter,
right?
Because we don't do that. We don't determine draft order on
right.
The final standings.
Yep.
So
yeah. Well, I was in the same 2 championships that I was in last year, mm-hmm. and I lost in my Yahoo League by 1 point. Big mistake was playing. Well, the big mistake was thinking that I played Atlanta last week against the Giants.
Oh, Indy, yeah.
And Atlanta went, 2 defensive touchdowns. Seemed like 62 sacks. All the stuff that went right. I had a 23-point output from. So I went with Indy this week, and Indy matched his defense, which was Dallas. Point for point, -4 to -4. So that cost me big time. And then I played. I was hemming and hawing. Do I play A.J. Brown or do I play Neighbors? And I was going back and forth. And then all of a sudden it was 2 minutes to noon, and I hadn't changed it out. And I was thinking, no, I'm just going to leave it. A.J. Brown got me this far. Yeah, that was a mistake.
Yep.
Neighbors went for 45 points in that league, and I had 12 out of A.J. Brown. So a 33-point difference, and I lost by 1. Yeah. In the other one, I had no chance going in. I was without CMC, obviously, for most of the year. Kamara, Chuba Hubbard. Mm-hmm. So I was without my 3 top running backs for the playoffs or for the championship.
Yep.
Then I was without CeeDee Lamb to top it off. And I had A.J. Brown playing with, a nobody quarterback. And, it was kind of funny because I played Marvin Mims. And Marvin Mims had 2 touchdowns and 30 points. And the guy I'm playing against, Honcho, he's like, dude, again, seriously, 30 points out of a guy that was predicted to have 4 or something. And I'm like, I was, the way he was used the week before, I was thinking he was due another, who did I have to play?
Exactly.
And I ended up losing by 10 points, which in reality is amazing that I made it that far. Now, we split the winnings before we even got to that point.
Yep.
So it wasn't and we did the same thing last year, and I beat him. Yep. So it was only fair to do it. And I think it was funny because, he always talks about the fact that here he's been running this league for 5 or 6 years, and he's always been one of the top teams. I mean,
Yeah.
and his roster is
it's crazy.
otherworldly. I mean, mine is really, really good, but his is otherworldly in the depth that he has.
Yeah.
And he's never won it.
Yeah.
So he's like, yeah, I'm always the dang bridesmaid. It happens. But this time I was pretty sure he was going to win, and he did. So good, good for him.
Yep.
We're going to look at our players of the year in a standard format. And the QBs were Lamar at 450.95 points, Josh Allen at 420.35 points, so about a 30-point difference. And this is a lot of points. You think about a quarterback. Quarterbacks are scoring a lot of points. Burrow with 414.75. Baker Mayfield with 390.95. And a rookie, Jaden Daniels at 390 point, what does that say? 90. So a 5/100ths of a point less than Baker.
Yep.
So there's a spread of 60 points between the top quarterback and the fifth quarterback, which is, it's smaller than usual.
Yeah.
Normally, a Josh Allen walks away with it. Or Lamar. I mean, either one of them, they just kind of, and Lamar did, 30 points is nothing to sneeze at.
No.
But over 16 weeks, because they only play 16 of the 17 weeks, it only amounts to 2 points a week. When it comes to a quarterback, well, if you're taking Lamar or Josh in the first round instead of taking a Barkley or a Chase or a Kittle, well, I wouldn't take Kittle in the first round,
Well, yeah.
but you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
You're losing out on so many points elsewhere,
Yeah.
especially in our 16-team league where you need two running backs, and if you don't have two decent running backs, well, you certainly better have Lamar and you better have Chase.
Yeah.
But you aren't going to get both of those because they're both gone by the start of the second
Yep.
or middle of the second. Moving on, we've got our running backs. We've got Barkley at 330.3, and then 39 points less, Henry at 291.3. A little bit less than 20 points less than that is Gibbs at 271.9, Bijan at 251.4, and Josh Jacobs at 246.7. And that's an 86-point stretch.
Yeah.
And you think about that, and that is, that's almost, 6 points a week
Yeah.
between your top running back and your fifth place running back. Massive difference.
Yeah.
Massive difference, especially when these guys are putting up 100 to 200 fewer points than your quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Barkley had a nice year, a really nice year, but it wasn't dominant like CMC has had in the past.
Yeah, well, Barkley, I mean, it was, you had the huge spike weeks, and then you had some of the kind of the middle weeks
Right.
where he was at like 15 points.
Oh, you had a couple of really low weeks.
Yeah, recently too,
Yeah.
because he didn't score any touchdowns.
Right.
He had the yardage, but did not score a whole lot of, it didn't score any
Well,
touchdowns.
he only had like 6 or 8 points in
Yeah.
a standard
Yeah.
a few weeks ago.
Yep. Yeah.
So-
Yeah. He had a down week, and I think, what was it, like the last week he had like 30 something carries or touches for like 115 yards scoreless.
that was it.
And that was it. So,
Yeah.
standard, yes, that's
11 and a half
11
points.
and a half points.
That'll kill
you. So, he wasn't, every week wasn't always the
Right.
number one running
Right.
back like CMC used to do, year
Right.
in and year out. Where,
Right.
and that was by 10 points every single week
Right.
that CMC was the number one. So, I mean, obviously Barkley was probably he was on the championship roster in our, Barkley and Henry, and the championship roster in our Yahoo League.
Jeez.
Yeah. And
How
Lamar.
Barkley
and Lamar.
I can get Lamar, but Barkley and Henry?
Yeah.
How many
so
teams?
12, and he was
Not a
picked
chance.
12.
And both of those guys were still there. Okay.
So
Yeah.
if it makes you feel better, I was 11. My first pick was Gibbs, and then he went Barkley, Henry, and then my next pick was Kyron, and my next pick was going to be whoever was left between Barkley, Henry, and Kyron. Because I figured that's of those three, that's who he was going to be looking at.
Yeah.
So I was going to take whoever was left out of those three. So I got Kyron.
Yeah, and at 12 or whatever, I was going to go Henry. Henry went at like 9 or 10 in our league.
Yeah.
But 16 team, 32, two running backs, so 32 running backs. Big difference when you're, the depth in running backs in a 12er is much different. I mean, you're going to get two starters and another.
We only have 5 bench spots too, so it's a short bench.
Very short bench.
So you got to really
But
starting lineup better be good.
You guys are all short bussers, so the short bench makes sense. Moving on to our wide receivers, we've got Jamar Chase at 268.4 and a 55-point spread to the next one, who is Justin Jefferson at 213.3, which is, comparatively, when you talk about a 30-point spread between first and second and QBs who are scoring 450 and 420, that's minimal. The 39 between 330 and 291, much bigger. And then you go to 55 points between the top wide receiver and the second wide receiver, and they're only scoring 268 and 213. Massive spread. And, that's what almost 4 points per week difference between first and second. Massive. Then we've got Amon-Ra St. Brown at 185.95. Brian Thomas Jr. at 190.7. Awesome job by the rookie. And then McLaurin at 175.6. So a 93-point spread between first and fifth.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, those are the types of numbers that we generally saw out of CMC.
Yeah.
At running back. And to have it in the wide receivers, it rarely happens.
Yeah. Well, like I said, you throw in that 51-point game that Chase had, weeks ago. He had some monster weeks.
He did.
There's a few down weeks in there because the Bengals started slow, like they always do.
Yep.
They always start super slow. So,
But that's the best time to have it not working.
Yes.
I would rather have him score 5 points a game for the first 5 games.
Yeah.
And then turn it into a 20-point a game week or a week thing going forward.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. They said, especially fantasy, in the Yahoo League, the big story was Isaac. He started 0-5. Yeah. And then ended the regular season of our fantasy league in 3rd place.
Yeah.
He went on a 9-10 game run where, because he had like Brian Thomas, he ended up with Chuba and Chase Brown. And then him and I had traded. He got Gibbs, so he had Gibbs at the end of the year. He did really good. And when he started like 0-5, I was, all of us were trying to pick at him.
Yeah.
And just trying to get those couple pieces in there, and he held with it for the most part.
Good for him.
And it worked out for him. So
yeah.
But Chase having that, like I said, it's you just put them out there, and here's probably at least 25 fantasy points almost every week. That's kind of your expectation.
Yep.
His projections in our PPR league were like 19 and 20.
Yeah,
like
which is probably low.
Yeah, and that's what Henry and Barkley were getting every week for projections too. So that's just crazy.
Yep. Moving on, we've got our tight ends. We had Kittle with 155.9. 13 points below that, we had Brock Bowers with a great rookie season at 142.10. 126.8 for Jonnu Smith. Never saw that coming.
Yeah.
And he actually, it's funny because over the last 4 weeks or so, he had a touchdown in every game.
Yep.
So, it was with him, it was end of season that was big for him.
Yep.
McBride, who had 126.3, and Mark Andrews, who turned it around after a horrible start to the season with 122.4. No Kelsey.
Yep.
The guys that know Likely, know, all of those guys. Hawkinson, although Hawkinson was out for quite a while. Laporta, who, we talked about Laporta being the heir apparent last year.
Well, he was the number one tight end.
I know,
after last
and he's not in the
season.
top five.
Yep.
But there was only a 33-point spread between your top tight end and your fifth tight end. So you picked up 2 extra points going earlier. Well,
Yep.
I mean, more than likely you picked McBride before Kittle or right around the same time. A lot of these guys.
Yeah, McBride, Andrews, Laporta, Kincaid, Kelsey.
I mean,
all of
Bowers
those
was
guys
Bowers
probably
was
went
still
before
up there.
Kittle. Yeah, but I mean, he was.
But Smith,
yeah.
no.
Johnny was a waiver wire.
Yeah,
He was a waiver
and that's the interesting thing is, you look at do you waste a high draft pick on a tight end? And I rarely do. I did one time and I got burned. I went Kelsey, and Kelsey had a bad year.
Yep.
The only one in the last 5 or 6, and it was that one.
Yep.
And it wasn't a bad year. It was average compared to the other tight ends. Well, if you're wasting a first round pick on average tight end, it's not worth it. So, that's why, if there's only a 33 point difference or 2 points a week between the top and the bottom, the fifth, I'm not wasting a pick.
No.
So, moving on, we've got our MVP of fantasy. Now don't get me wrong. Personally, I think that Lamar Jackson should probably win the MVP.
Probably.
And nothing against Barkley, although Barkley is not going to play this week. They're going to sit him, so he's not going to get a chance to beat Dickerson's record. And he said he's fine with it, which is interesting. I mean, there's your ultimate team player in my mind. I mean, a guy that's willing to forego that type of fame. I mean,
immortality.
Yeah.
I mean, how long has it been since Dickerson's done that?
Yeah.
And Barkley
he was
close,
well before you were born.
Oh yeah.
And well, not well before you were born.
95.
Yeah, I think he was. I mean, it was probably the decade before.
Yeah, in the 80s. Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to remember, I've been watching football since the 60s, so late 60s. So, you look at Lamar. Lamar ran for 800 and some yards and X number of times. The job that he did, and they'll say, well, Josh ran for X number of touchdowns too. Great. That's not what I'm talking about. As a guy who, it shows in non-PPR and in standard fantasy, 30 points more. He's more valuable. He did more things. The points prove it in my mind.
Yeah.
But we're talking about our MVP from a fantasy perspective, and I'm thinking it's Jamar Chase. And the reason I think it's Jamar Chase is those point differentials.
Yeah.
I mean, like we were talking about, if it's CMC and CMC beats those other running backs by 70, 75 points like he has in a standard format, that is the type of thing that wins you the MVP.
Yep.
And Jamar going, 55 points over the second best and 93 over the fifth best.
Yeah.
Monster numbers.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Crazy year. I mean, going in, next season, you could argue, especially PPR, he could argue he's going to be the number one pick.
Yeah.
Well,
even in, you're at a point now. I mean, even in a 16-team, 2 running back league, there are 32 starting running backs. Mm-hmm. If I've got the number 1 pick and go Chase, I still get 2 starting running backs.
That's true.
I've got the best wide receiver and 2 starting running backs. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
So, and, the funny thing is, so I pick at 1 and I pick at 32 and I pick at 33, you've got the opportunity to have, because you know that the Justin Jeffersons and probably Lamar and possibly a Bowers or someone is going to go in the first 2 rounds.
Yep.
And, there are some other players out here who aren't obviously, the CMCs, they'll be back next year, and they'll take draft picks away.
Yeah.
So I depending upon where you are, I could see picking him.
Yeah.
But it would have to be near the top of the first round.
Yes.
In a 32.
Yeah.
In a 16 team.
I think PPR is, yes, Barkley had 330. Standard. There's a pretty good gap there, but just like I said,
But it's points over replacement.
Yes.
If you look 5 down and you say the difference is going to be 93, it was huge.
Yeah.
It was huge for running backs too.
Yep. Yeah.
It wasn't for quarterbacks as big, and it certainly wasn't for tight ends.
Yeah, that's true.
So it just shows you the value of some of the positions and how important it is to have that top player at the position to get you to a championship. A lot of the championship teams, I'm guessing, had either Barkley, Henry, or Jamar Chase.
Probably.
And, so the value of those high draft picks. And unfortunately, there are teams out there that went CMC.
Yeah.
And I have him in our dynasty. There's nothing you can do about that. I would have gone CMC this year first also.
Yeah, I think
no brainer after two
I think the majority
solid years.
of people did. The majority of people, I believe, did go
Right.
CMC first.
Now the interesting thing will be to see what happens next year with him, because he's what, 27? He'll be 27 years old.
Yeah, that sounds right.
He is still, if healthy, in my mind, the best running back in football.
Yeah.
Because of the way he's utilized. So, I'm thinking if he falls past 5, it would be unbelievable.
There's a good chance that he might
He won't be if I'm
coming year.
picking
Well, yeah,
in the top
but
5.
I think he'll be at 5 or below that. I think this year for in the draft order.
In a 10 or a 12 teamer.
Yes, yeah,
In a 16 team 2 running back league, he's going to go top 5.
probably.
The only 2 that I see going above him would be Chase and JJ.
Yeah,
Those are the only 2 that I could possibly foresee being more important.
yeah.
Were there any injuries to wide receivers CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah.
CeeDee Lamb could be in that conversation of top 3 wide receivers also.
Yeah.
He put together a pretty darn good year without a quarterback.
Yeah.
And played.
Rush didn't play that.
No,
actually
but
played
he's not
fairly
Dak.
well, but yes, he's not Dak.
Right,
So,
and Dak-
and you get both of them back fully healthy.
Right.
Next
And he was also, CD was injured a good portion of the second half of the season. And very severely injured with that shoulder. So, I could see him being in the conversation he's definitely a top 3 wide receiver.
Yeah.
With JJ and Chase. It's just a question of, in a 16-teamer, are you going to go with one of those guys before going with a CMC?
Yeah.
If CMC is supposedly going to be back. So I'm guessing you agree on the MVP?
Yeah, there were some guys, like I said, obviously, next up would be Barkley, in my opinion.
Agreed.
The runner up for that
Agreed.
fantasy MVP.
And again, mainly because of that separation between 1 and 5 and even 1 and 2.
Yeah, and maybe a little biased because I had drafted him this year, but Jahmyr Gibbs was probably one of the most consistent fantasy points, his scores every single week. even compared to like a Barkley and Chase. You know, I mean, Gibbs
and that's
was
in spite of Montgomery.
Yeah, and I mean,
which
you
is
see
amazing.
See what he did at the end of the year,
Yeah.
where he averaged like 27 PPR,
Yeah.
like 27 PPR
Yeah.
fantasy points over those last 3 weeks without Montgomery. So you figure what he did in that 3 weeks. If you take Montgomery out the beginning of the season, you know, and obviously it's not a perfect science, but you know, there is potential there for him in that offense if he's the lone running back.
But he won't be for the next 2 years.
I know, but you know that potential's there, that he could have a CMC like season where he is 60
Totally
plus
dominant.
points over even a Saquon this
Yeah.
year.
Oh,
you know?
agreed.
I mean, he could have had one of the all-time fantasy, you know, seasons
Yeah.
ever.
Yep.
You know, it would have been insane, you know. So for me, he's in the list there too. You know, I mean, obviously, you know, Henry as well, but you know, I mean,
Yeah,
just-
Henry
just-
surprised me a lot.
well, and I think so. Like again, you know, you were kind of dumbfounded in our Yahoo league that he went. You know, he was first pick around 2.
Yeah,
You know,
I was
Barkley
surprised he
and Henry. Yeah.
lasted that long. But what I'm saying
Yeah.
is, I expected him to have a pretty good year, and I was, you know, at 12 or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
where I was picking, I was going to take him,
Yeah,
and he went like 9 or 10,
Mm-hmm.
and it surprised me a little bit that he was already gone because ADP had him at about 12
Mm-hmm.
or 13, and
somebody's betting on this season.
right
You
right
know?
and my thought was that yes, Gus Edwards got a lot of fall over touchdowns,
Yeah,
but you still have Lamar there. Lamar still ran for 835 yards or whatever, and Henry was still the number 2 fantasy football back.
yeah. I mean, like I said, I think that's why he, you know, again ended, you know, was in the first pick of the second round in our Yahoo league. Is, I mean, I was, you know, I thought he was going to have a decent season.
Right.
Definitely not this. I figured he was going to be a top 8 running back, not the number 2. You know,
Right.
that's why, like I said, my pick was, you know, I could have got Barkley or Henry at the 11, but I wanted Gibbs because of that.
Yeah.
That little bit of,
Well-
again, you don't want it to happen, but if Montgomery had gotten hurt
Right.
earlier in the season,
you don't know how they're
exactly.
going to spread that
Yeah.
coming
And
into
it
the
was
season.
so frustrating because every single game, it was the entire first drive was nothing but Montgomery.
Yep.
That or they'd bring Gibbs in and he would break a 25-yarder
And then
down
he'd
to
go
the
sit.
5, and then he goes and sits.
Montgomery
you
gets
know.
the touchdown. Yep.
Exactly. So it was really frustrating on that side. But, you know, like I said, I just, you know, I wanted Gibbs this year because I thought he was going to have a, you know, even with Montgomery, the way that they,
Mm-hmm.
you know, do that. Now, if Ben Johnson leaves this season, you know, in the off season here, might get a little bit more, you know,
Well,
there's a little more hesitation in that.
And the
but-
funny thing is, I think it was just it was last year when they were more of a pass-friendly offense, hence Laporta with big numbers, Amon-Ra St. Brown with bigger numbers,
Mm-hmm.
I think. They just, and Goff with bigger numbers. I mean, it as a Goff owner, I was sitting there, and granted, I got him like
yeah.
the
Yeah, you
10th
could
round
get
or
him super
so.
cheap, yeah.
Right. He was, you know, everyone was, I'm going second round with Lamar and Josh
Mm-hmm.
and Burrow and Baker didn't, Baker King, and Jaden Daniels and Anthony Richardson and,
Yeah.
you know, all those guys that people expected to have great years,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them did. But I got nearly as much out of Josh, out of Goff, as for where I drafted him,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
as someone gets out of Lamar.
Yep.
I mean, the value for me was
Yeah.
much greater
Yep.
because I got to take the players that I needed from other positions,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and they didn't. So,
Yep.
moving on to our Rookie of the Year from a fantasy perspective. Now, you know, I would guess that Jaden Daniels will probably get the Rookie of the Year from the NFL.
Yeah. Most likely.
Offensive Rookie of the Year. And, you know, I actually chose him for Rookie of the and it was a tough choice, let me tell you that, because, and you and I talked a little bit about it, Brian Thomas Jr. had a truly amazing year.
yeah.
Brock Bowers had an excellent year. Little bit of difference there.
Yeah.
And I took Thomas with the 10th pick in our rookie draft in Dynasty.
Yep.
And I believe he was the top scoring non-quarterback
Rookie. Yeah.
rookie
Yep.
in the top 10 taken. So, obviously I didn't get any of the top quarterbacks,
Yep.
which I don't know that I would have gone that way. I was actually looking for Xavier Worthy, and he went at 9, and I'm glad I didn't get him.
That's because of that's the quarterback he got
Right,
tied to.
right. And the quarterback play was substandard there, compared to what Patrick.
What you expect. From
Right. What Mahomes' standard is. I'm saying, when I say substandard there, I'm not saying he's a substandard quarterback.
Yeah.
I'm saying his play was substandard based on what he's done in the past.
Yep.
So I went with Jaden Daniels. He led the NFL in QB rushing yards.
Yeah.
Beat Lamar
Yeah.
in QB rushing yards. And Josh Allen was like 300 yards behind him. He was 25-9 in touchdowns to interceptions, and he had 6 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
To me, from a fantasy perspective, those are massive numbers. I mean, he was 5th. He was 0.05 of a point from 4th.
Yep.
He was 60 points from 1st in quarterbacks. Just an amazing year.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, he was right from the jump, week 1. Great week, and carried that in for a couple of weeks. And then I think after that was when he kind of got banged up in that Chicago game. So then he wasn't running at all.
Was he actually out for a couple weeks?
He did miss
Part of a game and then another?
I think it was that. No, it was not the Chicago game. No, that's not who they were playing when he got Pittsburgh. The first Pittsburgh game, I think, is when he got injured and then missed. And then, there was another one where...
Yeah, I want to say he missed at least a game in there.
Yeah.
Which makes that even
or
more
he started
amazing.
but didn't finish
Right,
the game. Yes,
right.
yeah. It was somewhere in there. But he had a dip in the middle and then ended pretty strong these last couple of weeks. Like I said, in the Yahoo League, I traded Jaden straight up for Joe Burrow. And kind of, kind of even.
Yeah,
at that point.
No one lost on that.
But when I made that trade was when I made that trade, and then I think it was the second time they played the Steelers, and he only had like 14 fantasy points against them, and Burrow had like 28 or something. So it's like, oh, sweet. And then the last couple of weeks of the season, they've been pretty similar. Yeah. Except for, Jaden had a really nice week this last week, but Burrow had a monster week this last week. So, Daniels, he's, I got him in like the 6th or 7th round in the Yahoo League, and I was sitting there debating between him and, I can't even remember who, and it might have been him or even Tua at that point, Yeah. I was looking for a quarterback, and and Nick, friend of the show, he goes, if you don't take Jaden here, I'm going to take him. In the next couple picks here, and I'm like, all right, took him, and
and ended up
paid off.
And obviously with a top 5 finish, and he is going to be, one of the going forward, one of the top quarterbacks that's going to be drafted. Now imagine if they get a second receiver.
Yeah.
Imagine them going out and getting a T. Higgins.
Well, we'll see. It might be tough because I did see something, and it supposedly came from T. Higgins, and he said that he wants to stay.
Oh, I'm sure
in
he does.
Cincy. He's like, being paid as a number 1 receiver isn't really like that big of a motivator. But
that's the way I look at it too. Yeah. I'm thinking to myself, let's see, I can't get $30 million a year, so would I settle for 24?
Yeah.
And
stay with,
stay
the
with
number 3 quarterback in the league this
right
year,
and
for
and
fantasy,
be opposite
and
the number 1
tied
receiver.
with generational Jamar Chase. Yes, absolutely, you stay there. So
Yeah.
I think it would take 30 million at least from a team to come and get him.
Oh,
away
yeah.
from Cincy
Yeah.
in this offseason.
Well, maybe Washington trades for that disgruntled receiver, or the soon-to-be disgruntled receiver in New York.
Garrett Wilson.
Yeah,
I've heard some talks of some Green Bay fans wanting him to
Yeah.
come over, but I think he would be too similar to some of our other receivers.
yeah.
I
Well-
still think we're missing that Devontae,
Control.
control, but just
Yeah.
big, 6'1", 6 foot, 6'1",
Well, and you saw what
200, 215 or whatever Devontae is that can just, push a DB or,
Well, and you saw what happens when you lose your big play receiver in Watson for the week against
Yes.
Minnesota. That changed things offensively for them.
Yeah.
They didn't have
We'll
anyone.
talk about the Packers after we get through this. 'Cause
Okay.
I've got some
Okay.
some gripes.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean Daniels, yes. I was gonna go with him. Obviously, I like we talked about, just to put the name out there because I think he needs it after the season, is Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah.
In PPR scoring, I had to put that he had 268.7, 80 catches, 1,179 yards, 10 touchdowns.
Yeah. Amazing.
And he had like 3 or 4 2-point conversions this year as well.
Oh, and and I looked at him in the rookie draft, and I sat there and I went, here is a guy who is playing on a team that really doesn't have a bona fide number 1 anymore after they got rid of Ridley.
Yeah.
And I mean,
people were like, "Oh, well, they still have Christian Kirk and him and Trevor
sure.
Lawrence do play really well and stuff." But
sure.
yeah,
And
when's the
who
last
was-
time you heard anybody say anything about Christian Kirk? I think he was out.
I think
didn't
it was-
they lose like 3 of their receivers in the same. And Thomas was
against-
one where he got
against
hurt.
the Packers.
Yeah, but it was like Kirk, and then it was
Gabe
from
Davis.
Buffalo. Yeah, Gabe Davis, and those I think both of them were out for
All
the
3
rest
of
the
yeah.
season.
Yes.
But Thomas he had gotten hurt in the
Yeah,
game.
he came
Yeah.
back. He was ribs.
Yeah.
About the only thing we've heard about Kirk is "Beam me up, Scotty."
So,
Oh boy!
so, anyways,
Didn't see that one coming, did you?
no, I did not.
Luckily, you know what Star Trek
Captain
is.
Kirk, yeah. Wow.
Well, and I told you
Yeah.
that I was going back and forth between Daniels and
Yes.
Brian Thomas because that was the tough choice for me.
Yep.
Because I mean, you had 3 rookies that were in the top 5 of their position.
Yep.
And yes, Bowers was higher than the other 2,
Yeah.
but it's at a position where there's not a lot of variance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and there's not a ton of points scored.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
yeah.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I love Brian Thomas. I mean, he's
Yeah.
going to be a wonder, and it's interesting because we're talking about rookies of the year. No mention of Caleb Williams.
Mm-hmm.
No mention of Marvin Harrison Jr.
Oof, yeah.
And no mention of another guy who I think is deserving of the conversation is Malik Neighbors,
Yes.
who, from a PPR perspective, was probably, it may have been higher than Brian Thomas. I'm not positive on that. He had more catches
Yeah.
by like
First
25
5
or
weeks of the season, he was the target leader in the NFL.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
and even potentially the reception leader at that point too.
Yeah.
Just obviously,
and he missed missed a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and horrible quarterback play.
Exactly. I mean, you sit
on
there,
a horrible team,
right? And I
yes.
sat there some weeks going, "Can I play him?"
Yeah.
And I played him, and then I don't play him in the Super Bowl, and I would have won walking away with the trophy instead of, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I've got in my other dynasty league with Nick that I'm in. I got Malik Neighbors, and then I believe I also got Brian Thomas Jr.
Wow.
in that draft. So my receivers next year are going to be starters are going to be Puka, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas Jr. So
That's not bad.
Yeah,
I mean, mine
sitting
are
pretty good. And then I still have Mike Evans,
That's not
Devontae,
bad. Oh, wow.
and then I've got like a couple other guys that
I mean, I've
have
got-
the potential, but yeah,
I've got that CeeDee Lamb guy.
yeah,
I've got AJ Brown.
it's pretty good.
I've got Brian Thomas Jr. I've got DK Metcalf. I've got Cedric Tillman.
Yeah, yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah. So, again, like I threw out Gibbs, my my little biased rookie of the year. If he had not had Rashad White in front of him to start
yeah.
the season and battling injuries, I think Bucky Irving, with what he did when he was healthy, was crazy good. And I feel like, minus us talking about him, I didn't really ever hear anything a whole lot about, because he was in the timeshare with Rashad White.
Yeah.
But when Bucky was healthy, there was a clear difference, in my opinion, watching those games on how that offense operated when it was Bucky versus Rashad, because Bucky is quick. He's a good rusher, where Rashad White is average.
Right.
But Rashad White's also really good at catching passes. But Bucky was, in my opinion, as good, if not better.
Well, he could hit the home run every time.
Yeah, exactly. So he's a little down that list,
well,
but he's in there.
It would be interesting to watch guys like Gibbs, guys like Bucky Irving, actually be given the main starting 90% role, like a Barkley or a Henry, or Bijan or Jacobs has, and see what they could do from a fantasy perspective. Now, obviously, none of these coaches, no
the
head
Lions
coach,
aren't going to get rid of Montgomery to be like, oh, let's see what Gibbs can do
right.
for a tight.
It's just never going to happen. Well, I shouldn't say never, but those guys aren't out here to help us win fantasy leagues or prognosticate on who would be an awesome player. If you get that every year that CMC is healthy.
Yeah.
You get the, oh my God, how can a guy be this valuable to a fantasy football team?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
So
So
you've got some griping to do.
yeah, watching that game, I got the
Well, and I don't
kids
know
out
if
there with
I don't
us
know
a
if you
little
read that Jair is out for the season now. He's having surgery for his PCL injury. So I mean,
Is that what he's been dealing with the whole time?
apparently.
Yeah.
It's
just get it done right away.
Right.
Get
And
it
wh-
done
and-
right away, because he could have been,
and why
Because
sit
he's been
here and
out for-
hide the fact from your fans?
Yeah, that too is weird. I mean, seeing on some of the Facebook posts and the groups and stuff, the Packer groups, and people are now saying that he had that game where he completely put the clamps on JJ.
Yeah.
Completely shut him out. But now the last 3 meetings we've had with the Vikings, he's been out.
Yeah.
So people are now like, oh, he's scared of him.
Oh,
the one
no.
game, and that's what he wants.
He's
to
not.
be
He's
known.
not scared of him, but
yes, that's what people are like. It was weird this year that exactly, like, now he's getting surgery.
Yeah.
When he's been out for 6 weeks,
Yeah.
if not more,
Yeah.
7 even now.
6-7 weeks. Yeah.
Get that done right away.
Right.
He could have been back by now.
Right.
Going into
And-
playoffs.
And we've said, and I've been a huge backer of him. I think he's arguably one of the best players, at cornerback in man coverage that we've seen in quite a while. And go ahead and say your Sauce Gardner's. No, Sauce Gardner is horrible this year, or almost horrible. And he does it year in, year out. However, as I believe he's the top paid cornerback. If you're not available, you're not doing us any good.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting next year to see, if they'll try and restructure a little bit, save some money, try and find, and just be like, dude, we love you.
Yeah, I
We
hate
need you to be
that
out
there
on
are
the
injuries
field.
and everything.
Yes, we need you on the field, but let's restructure a little bit here.
Yeah, 27, 28 million a year ain't cutting it when you
some
can't
money
do
back
it.
into our cap. Let us go get a couple other pieces to help us,
Right.
Make a real.
They've got
run.
68 million in cap next year.
Nothing wrong with having more.
No, I agree.
But another my gripe was one. It was traumatic watching a Green Bay Packard wearing number 20 getting burned multiple times. Bullard
Yeah.
a couple times. I saw the number 20 and having PTSD back to Kevin King. So
Yeah, and that
this was his first game back too off an
Right.
injury,
And that
against
play by-
Minnesota is
by Addison.
yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it. I mean, it was a great play by Addison,
Yeah.
and I'm not picking on Bullard for that because I think 98% of DBs would have or safeties would have missed that.
Yeah.
He came out there and it looked. I mean, he stopped running. He was just kind of standing there, and all of a sudden he flipped and he's by him.
Yep.
I don't know how you can be ready for a play like that. I mean.
Yeah.
You have to maybe stand a couple yards further back,
Yeah.
but then you're given that shot right across the middle where
Yeah.
it's tough. It's,
Yeah.
I agree with you, but it's tough.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, that was my one thing during that game. One of the things, too, was just seeing that number 20,
Well,
trying to catch up to a guy,
here's here's the other thing that I really don't like about the Packers offense this year is the lack of the quick slant.
They're always, and they were talking about it in either I think maybe it was the post game, or I saw it in another talk show, and they were like, Green Bay's too boom or bust on their offense,
Right.
and we've been relying on the boom so much that against average to below average teams, we look like, holy cow, these guys
Doug Boom.
could win a Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah,
against
yeah.
the average to bad
Yeah,
teams.
yeah.
Oh my God,
Well,
these
but-
guys are
but-
contenders.
but here's
And then
the
you run
interesting
against
thing.
a good team, and we look
Well, our 5 losses have come to teams with 2, 2, and 3 losses.
yes,
So we've played well against everybody else.
yeah,
And that was without Quay Walker, Evan Williams, Jair Alexander, and Watson. So, and a mix of those throughout the season at different times. And, in all actuality, I think we could have beaten Philadelphia
Yeah.
in the first week. So
yeah. That was that one was everybody
But-
remember that was a horribly maintained soccer field,
Right.
and Love tweaking getting the knee injury late.
Right.
I mean, that was like last play, but horrible
conditions. Yeah.
conditions. There
But
was,
then
yeah.
I sat here. It was 2-3 years ago where we were playing against the Bears and we were down like 17-3 or something at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there and I said, "Why are we not throwing the quick slants?" And what did we do in the second half? Boom! There was the quick slant. I did not see any quick slants this past week.
Yeah, and
And someone can say, well, they were playing a defense that was a little bit. No, you can always that 2-step and slant is available.
That's pretty much a guaranteed 5-yard
Right.
right there every single time. As long as the side you're throwing it to is the correct side, you're not to the strong side of the defense or anything. But you hit
Well,
on,
and where
you hit
the
on that.
linebackers are and everything, but
Yeah, you hit on a quick slant. That's a guaranteed 5 yards,
and
Guaranteed.
possibly 12,
Yeah,
15
exactly.
or house.
Yeah. The minimum is like 5 yards on quick. You watch the teams that utilize that,
Yep.
and it's just, they do it. I mean, and they do it against us too.
Yeah.
They do it against us. That's part of the reason why, on that Cam Akers catch at the end to ice the game,
Yep.
they ran,
Quick
the
post.
bat, and he snuck out, and they had been setting that play up all game where they weren't leaking a running back out that way.
Yep.
So they ran it. Normally the running back would step up and pass pro, and then they leaked him out, and that's why he was so wide open.
Yep.
But yes, we're missing, stuff like that. I've talked about it before on here where it drives me nuts when offensive coordinators and teams, it's 3rd and 3 and you're throwing it 40 yards down the field. Just get the yard, get first down.
And it wasn't like you were throwing it to Watson, who you've got that rapport with now.
Mm-hmm.
You were throwing it to Bo Melton.
Yeah.
And Bo Melton hasn't been out there for those types of plays this season pretty much at all.
Yeah.
So that timing and how far to throw it and everything, it doesn't work the same. Mm-hmm. So I agree. I was frustrated by that, especially when you had a guy open and you could have taken the 5-yard pass for the first down.
Get the fresh set of downs.
Yep.
It's just it's the trends that start. Every team starts doing that where it's short yardage. You're on 3rd or even 4th down. Sometimes teams take a shot and it's just like, what? Get the yardage, and then on 2nd down in the next series you can take a shot. It just I don't understand it.
Well,
because,
sometimes it's because of the fact that you've got 9 guys that are in the box.
That's true,
and you get a guy that if he gets separation, it's a home run.
Yeah, but again, like we just said, hearing that the whatever show that was that I saw, the boom or bust, you don't hit on those,
right?
Or it's a bust. Yeah. My last thing about Green Bay, and we've talked about it, about Jordan Love, I need to see some sort of emotion out of him. He is too. In certain situations, I love that he doesn't get riled up. He seemingly doesn't get nervous, doesn't get twitchy. But I got to see something out of you, dude.
Yeah.
The whole entire first quarter, every pass he threw to me looked like he just flicked it, and it was just real nonchalant. Yeah, it just seemed like there wasn't any urgency on any of his passes or anything like that. There were a handful of drops by receivers. Some of them were a difficult catch, but hit him in the hands. Should have pulled it in.
Yep, Wicks and Reed both dropped a couple each.
I got to see something out of him. It's hard for. You go into a game like that where Minnesota's playing for a chance to win the NFC North, and with how
not only the NFC North,
the NFC,
being the number 1 seed,
home field advantage, everything. They're playing for a deep run, and we're not. And you're coming in and you're just flicking the ball around.
So if we're on that, let's start with the coin flip. We win the coin flip and we take the ball. Mm-hmm. I don't like it. I don't like it. Inevitably, it seems like almost every time we do that, we lose the game. Mm-hmm. And we're struggling to get back to, if it's tied going into halftime and we had the ball in the first half, you lost. Yeah. Because they get the ball to start the second half. Mm-hmm. Take the ball, it always defer in my mind. But
like you said, I need to see. Don't be, and I wonder if he's worried about being like Aaron a little bit, to where Aaron, when he got fired up, it was condescending. Yeah. The faces, the shoulder shrugs, you get the what the F are you doing when you see it on, you can read his lips, he's rolling his eyes. Oh, you miss a pass and he throws the hands up and he's pouting around. I wonder if there's a little bit that he doesn't want to be like that, but I need you to show some emotion and lead this team, because it's hard when you're playing a team that was as fired up as Minnesota is. Oh, yeah. And the star of the team, Jordan Love, is, makes a bad pass, or we drop a pass and the camera pans to him and he just kind of shakes his head a little bit, and he's standing there and that's it. Yep.
Yep. Agreed.
You need a little bit of fire out of you. You got to show a little bit, lead on the sidelines.
Get fired up. Exactly. Yell at someone every once in a while.
Yeah, but
or tell them, dude, that's on me. Yeah. Let them know. Hey, dude, that's on me.
Yeah. I need to see something out of him. I like I said, I like in certain situations he doesn't get, riled up or frazzled or anything, but we got to see something constructive, to help fire up the entire rest of the team, because it affects the defense too.
Agreed.
So,
Well, that is all we've got for the 2024 fantasy season. Hope you have enjoyed listening to us go on and on about the Packers.
Might have to start another little
Yeah, sidecast.
sidecast.
Slide into my DM cast. Wait, no.
Side piece podcast.
Side piece. Yeah. And now with the side piece. Otherwise,
we're gonna have Nick come in. He'll be the side piece.
he'll
on
be the side
podcast.
piece. Okay. Otherwise, I'm Ozzy.
And I'm Austin.
Have a great week.
See you later.